Well, everyone, it's time for us to go ahead and do another camera comparison between the iPhone 14 Pro, iPhone 13 Pro, iPhone 12 Pro, and iPhone 11 Pro. Now, what's very interesting about this comparison is all these iPhones are the iPhones that I've used personally as my main device, and I will definitely tell you, well, the 14 Pro I haven't switched to yet fully, but the 13 Pro, 12 Pro, and 11 Pro, I used them for about a year each, and I still love these iPhones. They are great. They have tremendous cameras. And what is very interesting between all of them is that the core features between them are kind of the same. I said the same thing about the 11 Pro Max comparison to the 14 Pro Max one I dropped yesterday, the day before, and my opinion stands on these ones as well. If you have even an iPhone 11 Pro, there's a lot of overlap with the 14 Pro. The 14 Pro definitely has the best camera here, but there are some key things with the 14 Pro that Apple still hasn't fixed yet that they actually need to address and they need to fix with the 14 Pro, because the same thing happened with the 13 Pro and they still haven't fixed that one yet either. Because the same thing happened with the 13 Pro and they eventually fixed that, but it seems like they haven't ported over the actual features yet. Now, before we look at some of the photos, which weren't super crazy, I mean, we can tell which one's going to be better. There are a lot of hardware differences and a lot of software differences between all of them. So number one, for starters, the iPhone 11 Pro, which came out in 2019, has the same exact camera setup for the most part as the 14 Pro. All of these cameras have ultra-wide lenses, they have wide-angle lenses, and they have telephoto lenses. But a big thing to keep in mind is that a phone like the iPhone 11 Pro, that phone only has 10x zoom, but it still has 0.5x zoom. With the 14 Pro, it does have 15x zoom, but it still maintains that 0.5x zoom as well. The cameras are also much larger on the 14 Pro, as you guys can probably tell over the video. So you are going to be getting a much bigger lens, has a lot more capability, has a lot more features built in as well. So although they have the same exact camera type of lenses, you are getting still a much better, better photo quality and video quality from the 14 Pro. On top of that, the video resolutions you can film in are actually the same. You can do 4K at 60 on the front and the back on all of these cameras as well. Now, the 14 Pro is the first time we've seen in a long time where Apple actually went ahead and increased the megapixel count. But beyond that, the 13 Pro, the 12 Pro, and the 11 Pro all have 12 megapixel sensors. So that's probably another thing to keep in mind as well. On top of that, all these phones have portrait mode, which is great, but the 13 Pro and the 14 Pro both have cinematic mode, which is like portrait mode for video. We do not have that type of capability on the iPhone 12 Pro or the iPhone 11 Pro, so that's another thing to probably keep in mind. On top of that, with the 14 Pro, we now have cinematic mode at 4K, so that is really cool. But we also have this new action mode, which is like super stabilized video for the iPhone 14 Pro, where we did not have that on the 13 Pro, 12 Pro, or the 11 Pro. Now, after using all these phones, with the 13 Pro, 12 Pro, and 11 Pro, all of these cameras are great. If I had to, I could still use an iPhone 11 Pro camera for my, for everything that I do on an everyday basis, and I would still have a tremendous experience with the iPhone 11 Pro. It just so happens that the 14 Pro has the, it's the better lens, it has the better, most capability out of all of them. So that is kind of the quick synopsis of all these cameras. Now, if we go and make my way over to my screen right here, the way I kind of broke this down is all the iPhone 14 photos will be on the top left, the 13 Pro photos in the top right, the 12 Pro photos here, the 11 Pro photos here, and you can look at the corners and you'll basically see which one's which. Now, this first photo, nothing crazy, just outside taking a photo of this flower. This is the problem that I have with the 14 Pro. I disabled the macro toggle on all these, so they all have, the 13 Pro and 12 Pro have this macro mode, but Apple went ahead and addressed and fixed this issue on the 13 Pro. Look how far away I have to be on the 14 Pro to make sure the photo's not blurry on the non-macro mode. So this is as far as I could get without it being, blurry. If I zoom in, then maybe it could be a little bit of the same thing, but that is one thing that kind of stood out to me immediately. Now, one thing I've been noticing with the 12 Pro photos, for some reason they all look washed out. I took all these photos at the exact same times. None of the cameras or anything are messed up on all these, so it's weird that my 12 Pro photos notoriously have been giving me weirder photos. My 11 Pro looks very, very good, but I will say the 13 Pro photo probably looks the best out of all of these. Again, disabled macro toggles on all these. I think the 13 Pro is the only one that had it. The 12 Pro and 11 Pro don't have it, so it's very, very weird. But you can see I had to basically zoom out a ton on the iPhone 14 Pro because the photo just, was being blurred out. So definitely the 13 Pro wins there. This next photo, again, just another quick little whatever flower thing this is. Nothing crazy. And you can see again, they all blurred out the background, which is nice, but as I mentioned before with the 14 Pro, because of that macro toggle, I have to be a little bit more wary and have to make sure that photo is not blurred out on the 14 Pro. Apple still needs to fix this. Again, it's not a crazy big deal. The same thing happened with the 13 Pro when it first came out, but Apple still hasn't fixed it. Now the background looks pretty blurred out on all of them, but it's funny because I think the 12 Pro blurred out the background the most out of all of them. If I kind of look at them like this, I mean the 12 Pro kind of looked like it blurred out the most. The 11 Pro did a great job as well for it being as, as old as it is. The 13 Pro photo looks very, very good. If you look at the flower, it looks a little washed out on the iPhone 14 Pro. The 13 Pro photo looks crisp. That flower looks really, really good on this specific phone. With the 12 Pro, it doesn't look as good as the 11 Pro. I've kind of said this before. The 12 Pro photo looks a little bit more washed out, in my opinion, than something like the iPhone 11 Pro. The 11 Pro looks really, really good. The 14 Pro looks okay, but the 13 Pro definitely looks the best out of all these again. So far, all these photos I've been kind of aiming for something like the iPhone 13 Pro, which is pretty insane. Now this next photo I took of the sky, and this is another really big difference as well. So the 11 Pro and 12 Pro kind of look kind of the same. In my opinion, we're kind of seeing this kind of effect on both. The 11 Pro added this little, I guess that's the glare from the sun. It looks beautiful on the 11 Pro. The 12 Pro, again, a little bit more glossy. Again, I wiped down all the lenses and all of them in between shots as well, and very weird that we were getting this type of effect on here. The 13 Pro photo looks beautiful. That photo looks really, really good, as well as the 14 Pro. I think the 14 Pro photo looks really good as well. I think the 13 Pro, if we look at like this specific tree right here, it looks super sharp on the iPhone 13 Pro, as well as the blue color on the background. I feel like the blue on the background of the iPhone 14 Pro doesn't look as good as the 13 Pro, and I like the tree on the iPhone 13 Pro as well. With the 12 Pro, looks like it's a little glaring effect. Maybe could be due to the sun. I'm not too sure. The 11 Pro added this glare, which I kind of like, but some people may not like. And the background looks a little bit better on the iPhone 11 Pro as well. So when we look at just this little indicator right here, I think the iPhone 14 Pro looks good. But again, I think the iPhone 13 Pro probably looks the best one out of this specific photo as well, which is another pretty crazy thing. Now this next photo, again, nothing crazy. This is actually one of my favorite photos to take, but this is another good indicator of how the coloring profile is in all these phones. Now if we look at the 12 Pro and the 11 Pro, they look good. I mean, again, I think the 11 Pro looks better than the 12 Pro if I'm being completely honest. If we take a look at the iPhone 13 Pro on the top right, this is another indicator, in my opinion, of how both coloring profiles kind of look like. Now if we look at this stem at the very bottom, you can kind of be able to tell how each of these photos, and again, I tapped to focus on all of them at the exact same spot, which was about this specific area right here. And you can kind of see for yourself how all these photos kind of take these photos. Now, like I mentioned, I feel like the 14 Pro kind of has a little issue right now with its macro toggle. When you disable it, the photo kind of looks a little bit more blurred out than it should have. With the 13 Pro, this photo looks awesome. This photo looks great. It's not even that crazy great of a photo, but it looks really good on the 13 Pro. The 12 Pro as well doesn't really look that great. It looks kind of bland. And the 11 Pro looks better than the 12 Pro. And I would even say the iPhone 11 Pro photo here looks better than the 14 Pro photo as well. The only thing is the iPhone 11 Pro, it didn't blur out the background that much, where the 14 Pro blurred out the background more. But at this specific indicator, I would probably say that the iPhone 13 Pro is probably the best one, followed by the iPhone 11 Pro, then followed by the iPhone 14 Pro in this specific indication, at least in my opinion. Now this final photo, again, nothing crazy, just of the tree here. And when I took all these photos, I kind of noticed immediately how great the photos looked on all of them. I feel like all these phones here took really good photos here. If you showed me the iPhone 11 Pro photo or the 12 Pro photo, I don't think I would be able to tell differences immediately. But after looking at these photos side by side next to each other, we are starting to see again the 11 Pro and the 12 Pro they don't blend out the photo, but I don't know if the color profile, they don't add a filter over it or something, but it just doesn't look as great as the 13 Pro and 14 Pro. So you can see right here, they both, I think look sharper and look almost like cinematic quality. I wouldn't say cinematic quality, but they look really, really good on both the 13 Pro and the 14 Pro. Now, if we take a look on these specific portions on both these phones, I don't know if one photo immediately stands out to me the most. I will say, I think the 14 Pro here probably looks like the best one. If we look at like these specific like plants up here, I feel like personally, probably the 14 Pro looks to be like the best one here. I feel like it kind of kept this specific photo, like these plants, a little bit more in focus. That's kind of what I was trying to focus in on. And it looks like the 14 Pro actually did end up kind of keeping these in foreground, and it blurred out the background a little bit more on the iPhone 14 Pro as well, which I kind of like. So I will say between all these, I think the iPhone 14 Pro is probably the first. This is the first photo I think where the 14 Pro actually kind of won at. It blurred out the background a lot more, and it kept the plants kind of in the foreground versus something like the iPhone. I would say the iPhone 12 Pro and 11 Pro kind of did the exact same thing. So I will say, to kind of wrap up this whole entire comparison, I think the iPhone 13 Pro camera, at least for now, is probably the better camera in my opinion. I feel like Apple needs to go ahead and address some of these bugs. The main bugs are, one, the macro mode. They need to go ahead and make sure that when we disable macro mode, that the photos aren't actually, messing up and they're actually blurring the photo out, because they're not blurring the photo out and they're not focusing in properly when they're not on macro mode. The same thing happened with the 13 Pro last year, so I think they can fix it. The other thing is that maybe sometimes the iPhone 14 Pro photo, it doesn't want to focus in on and blur out the background as much as the 13 Pro. But sometimes, we kind of saw that as the indicator, so sometimes that happens as well. But ultimately, I think the 13 Pro is probably the better one still. I think the 14 Pro is better sometimes, but I feel like Apple needs to, kind of improve that camera. But going from an 11 Pro to a 12 Pro to an iPhone 14 Pro, that's a pretty big difference in the camera, if I'm being honest. So in terms of that kind of covers it up here. If you have any other thoughts or questions, please let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.